everyone, and welcome to this video which is going to explain the critical period hypothesis relating to language learning. Okay, so the critical period hypothesis states that there is a critical period for language development, and that if a child has not been provided with opportunities to learn language by the time the critical period is over, language will never be able to be properly acquired by that child. Alright, so at birth, there isn't much difference between the functioning of the two hemispheres of the brain, but around age 2, the process of lateralization occurs. This is where the right and the left hemispheres of the brain take on particular roles for certain mental functions, and this continues developing up until around about puberty. So the relationship between language development and lateralization is very complex and is the subject of a lot of debate in the neurolinguistic world, and that's why this is a hypothesis. It hasn't been proven beyond all doubt, but this is basically our best guess at how language is acquired by children. Okay, so there are 4 main pieces of evidence which support the critical period hypothesis, and they are that there are different patterns of recovery in brain damaged adults compared to brain damaged children, feral children, children with Down syndrome, and the process of learning a second language is the last one. So we're going to go through each one of these. Okay, so the first is brain recovery pattern. So the older you are when you sustain a brain injury, the worse the recovery. Young children are able to recover from brain injury much more quickly and effectively than older people are. And this supports the critical period hypothesis in the sense that it demonstrates that children's brains are a lot more elastic. They're more plastic, they can be molded and changed far more easily, and they're much more adaptable than the brain of an adult. Okay, the second thing that supports the critical period is feral children. So these are children who have not been exposed to human language in the critical period, and they struggle to obtain full language. Typically, the examples that we have of feral children are children who have been quite severely neglected. So there is an argument as well that it's the trauma that kind of limits them from learning language, but we're thinking about children who have not had significant human interaction during the critical period, and there's a hypothesis that because they've missed the critical period, they're not able to learn language. Some children, such as Jeannie, who you're going to read about in a moment in the textbook, were able to learn some language but couldn't ever obtain full grammar. So parts of the language could be acquired, but in terms of the native grammar that we all have as native speakers, that wasn't really acquired by her or by other feral children. However, other children who were discovered to be neglected and not have significant human interaction, if they were discovered young enough, they were actually able to learn the full language. So that does indicate that the critical period does have some bearing on how language is learnt. Okay, so children with Down syndrome follow the usual pattern of development of children, but they follow it at a slower rate. So depending on how slow the rate is, sometimes their language learning skills can be pushed back to post-puberty or post, I guess, the upper limit of the critical period. And if that does happen, they also are not able to fully acquire language, which also indicates that, or it indicates support of the critical period. Finally, learning a second language. So no matter how much exposure second language learners get to their target language, they're never going to have the fluency of a native speaker if they don't learn the language during the critical period. Second languages appear to be stored in a different part of the brain than the mother tongue, meaning the first language that you learn. Bilingual children appear to store both languages in the same part of the brain because they are learning both of the languages during the critical period, and as a result, they don't have those limitations in second language learning. Alright, so what I'd like you to do now is go to the yellow book, Love the Lingo, and read pages 55 to 57. And you need to summarise that section of the textbook in regards to the following 2 things. So the first thing is what the critical period hypothesis is. So what's the argument? And then finally, what is the evidence that supports the critical period hypothesis?